Welcome back to another lesson, everyone. We kicked off last lesson with how to answer bar charts. This lesson, we're going to look at the next question type, which is line graphs. We'll learn how to attempt this question type during this lesson. Now, luckily for us, this is also another common question type for task 1. Here, you will be given a line graph, sometimes 2, which have multiple lines that display changes over a period of time. We should ideally spend 20 minutes on this task and write at least 150, 160, or a maximum of 200 to 210 words, because remember, we have another task to complete within the hour. Also, remember that you are being tested on your ability to select key features from the graph and present the main trends in a summary in the form of a formal report. Make sure you also compare the data appropriately. All right, let's get started and learn how to answer line graph questions. Keep this structure in mind as well. Ideally, your essay should have 4 paragraphs, where paragraph 1 is your introduction, paragraph 2 is your overview, paragraph 3 is your first main feature, and paragraph 4 is your second main feature. First of all, let's look at what we need to do. Take a look at the question we have on screen. We'll have to analyze it first. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task. The graph below shows how elderly people in the United States spent their free time between 1980 and 2010. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons wherever relevant. All right, let's analyze. So let's highlight or underline what the question is telling us and asking us to do. The graph below shows how elderly people in the United States spent their free time between 1980 and 2010. We'll have to summarize the information, we'll have to select and report the main ideas, and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so we know that every question consists of the first sentence, which is a brief description of the graphic, the second sentence, which are the instructions, and again, the graphic, which will be presented in the chart, graph, or table format. This one is a line graph. Now, sentence 2 tells you what you have to do, and those are 3 things, which are select the main features, write about the main features, and compare the main features. So we can see that we are looking at a line graph that shows us the free time activities of the elderly in the US from 1980 to 2010. We can see the x-axis shows us the time period in years, and the y-axis is in the form of percentages. We also have a key to indicate the different activities. All right, let's move on to the next step, which is identifying the main features. This is actually my favorite part. The great thing about this task is that the graphic isn't very difficult to interpret. Remember, you are being tested on your language skills and not your mathematical ability. We just need to identify the main features. So let's do that. First of all, for hiking, there's always been a steady increase. For theater, it was less popular through the years. Decade-wise, most popular 1980 to 1999 was TV, 1990 to 2000 was TV and hiking, 2000 to 2010 there was an increase in all of them except for TV, which had declined. Reading and theater, sporadic, least popular at the start, surfing the net. Right, so now that we have some features to write about, let's go on to step 3, which is writing the introduction. We know now that we have to paraphrase the question to boost our lexical resource score in particular. Let's take a look at the question again. The graph shows how elderly people in the United States spent their free time between 1980 and 2010. So we can say something like, the line graph provides information about the activities done by the elderly during their leisure time over 3 decades in the US. Now here, we've used quite a few synonyms and also managed to paraphrase the question. First of all, we paraphrase the first line by saying the line graph provides information about. We could have also said the line graph illustrates or the graph shows information about. We also found an alternative for free time, which is leisure time. I would say this is a good alternative as we might have to repeat the word free time a lot, so it's good that we found that. And also, instead of saying between 1980 to 2010, we said over 3 decades. We could have also said in the span of 30 years. All right, on to the next step, which is writing an overview. We're going to report the main features that can be seen and only give general information. We will include details later on in the essay. What we also need to do is make any clear comparisons that can be spotted, which will be easy for us because we found these when we analyzed earlier on. Let's try this. Overall, we can see that generally the activities listed have been increasingly popular amongst the elderly, with hiking increasing steady throughout the years and watching TV being the most popular. On to the next step, which is writing your detailed paragraphs. You'll have 2 of them. First of all, let's talk about the trend in the first decade and see how it fares to the final decade, as well as the most popular activity. So from our analysis, we can see that watching TV started off as the most popular activity, and it also declined slightly during the final decade projected. We can also see the steady increase in hiking, so let's build on that. How about something like, in the 1980s, the largest proportion that the senior citizens spent time doing was watching TV. After a rise to a peak at 70% in the 2000s, it dropped to 65% in the 2010s, which surpassed by hiking around 2005. Hiking has a continuous rise from around 20% in the 1980s to about 80% in the 2010s, which took over the first place as opposed to watching TV. Here, we have both facts and figures as well as ample vocabulary, linking words without word repetition as well. Let's move on to detailed paragraph number 2. Let's look at the other key features. It can be seen that reading and surfing the internet both increased from the 1980s to 2010s. To be exact, after a mild rise between the 1980s and 1990s, time spent on reading dropped to around 20%, then increased dramatically to about 60%. The figures for surfing the internet kept increasing, which was slightly before the 2000s. And then, similar to reading, it increased to around 50% by the end of the period. Let's put this together, shall we? See, now that wasn't too bad, was it? We were able to find the main points and then jot them down by paraphrasing, paragraphing, and extending our vocabulary and making sure our points are coherent and cohesive. Well, join me for the next lesson where we'll crack how to answer pie charts. See you then.